and I'm a project manager in the Renewals and Materials branch in the Division of Spent Fuel Management at the NRC, and I'm the contact and the lead for the meeting today. And I want to welcome everyone to this meeting with Dominion representatives. The purpose of the meeting is for the meeting to talk about the upcoming submittal of the application of the North Carolina Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation Facility. Because this is an open Category 1 meeting, members of the public are welcome to attend and observe the meeting. And we have a couple members of the public on the phone and also here in the room today. And at the end of the meeting, we will provide the public members an opportunity to ask questions of the NRC staff. A report of the meeting will be prepared by NRC staff, and it will be based in Adams, which is NRC's electronic document management system, and will be made publicly available. Any documents presented by any party will become part of the meeting record, and they will be made publicly available unless they contain proprietary or sensitive information and should be withheld from public disclosure under 10 CFR 2.390. The meeting report will include a summary of our discussion topics and if we have any action items. Our goal is to have the meeting report completed within 30 working days following the meeting. And although we intend to have an open dialogue today, please note that there will be no regulatory commitments made during the meeting. And for today's meeting, we'll be following the agenda that was attached to the meeting notice, and there are some copies in the corner of the room there. And also for folks on the phone, there are copies of the meeting notice and agenda on NRC's public meeting webpage. Finally, I want to mention that we have copies of NRC's Safety Culture Policy Statement for anyone who's interested. The NRC Chairman has noted that strengthening and sustaining safety culture remains a top priority at the NRC. An assurance of an effective safety culture must underlie every operational and regulatory consideration at nuclear facilities in the U.S. and worldwide. So if you'd like a safety culture brochure, we have some copies here in the room. A few more administrative items just before we move on to introductions. I'd like to ask that everybody sign in on the attendance sheet. And for any folks on the phone, if you haven't let me know your name yet, if you could please email me your name just so I could include you on the list of attendees. And for the attendees on the phone line, if you could please mute your lines until the portion of the meeting. We'll open up the lines for introductions, and then we'll also open up the lines for questions after the Dominion presentation. So if you could mute your phones in the meantime, we would appreciate it. And if you don't have a mute button on your phone, you can press *6, and that will mute your line. And then also for the folks in the room, if you could please turn off your phones and electronic devices. And finally, if you could please complete the public meeting feedback form. We do have that online on our public meeting webpage, and that's one of the tools we use to figure out how we can improve these types of interactions with stakeholders. So we invite you to complete that. And now we can go ahead and move on to introductions. So once again, my name is Chris Banovac. I'm a project manager in the Renewals and Materials branch.
My name is Al Santos. I'm chief of the Renewals and Materials branch.
I'm Tony Banks with Dominion, project lead for license.
I'm Paul Lakin from Dominion.
Rich Ritter with Dominion.
Brian Wakeman, Dominion. NRC.
Everybody. For the folks on the phone, it sounds like we don't have too many folks on the phone, so we'll go ahead and open up the lines. Could you please introduce yourselves to those folks on the phone? Let's start with the NRC folks on the phone.
Hey, Ann. Materials review in the Renewal and Materials Renewal branch.
This is Paula Cooper with Region 2 Reactor Inspector.
Anyone else from the NRC?
Yeah, Jean Cliff-Husman from the Environmental Review Branch.
Anybody else from the NRC? And how about members of the public on the phone?
Mute off.
This is Aparna Aleshwaram from Structural Integrity Associates.
Carlin Green with UX Consulting.
Any other members of the public?
Mute on.
or other members of industry or other stakeholders? So I would ask the folks on the phone to please mute your lines now until the end of the Dominion presentation. And now I'll turn it over to Al Santos, and he'll provide some opening remarks.
Thank you for coming in for a pre-app meeting. Hopefully we'll get some information across during this meeting that, as you know, we're still updating some of our guidance and everything, but it should be out there soon, and so hopefully you'll have a more stable regulatory framework to use forward. But we're actually meeting this Thursday with ACRS, our advisory committee, to finalize the publication, to get the final okay to publish. So hopefully you'll be the first one after that publication. But it's okay. I mean, we'll work with you to figure out the ins and outs of the renewal application and the review process. So hopefully this will go smoother than the previous one. Thank you.
And with that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Al, thank you very much. Prepared to talk about our impending application for hosting a facility. Just a little bit of background. I've been doing license renewal for a long time, and really mainly focused on plant license and heading up the second license renewal. And they go through time after we did the first renewals for North Canada and Surrey. We did the Surrey ISPC renewal, and at that time things weren't as developed as they are now. So when we came off plant renewals, we got into ISPC. Not much solid framework behind it, I guess I would say. So we took the opportunity to provide some comments to the staff, and I think which later became Rev 0, the new rig. And at the time we filed an exemption because we were the first, I think we were the first at the time to submit a site-specific license renewal. So that was exciting, and the exemption was to go from 20 to 40 years, which is now embedded in the regulations. So I think we've had a mark in the industry from that regard, but we do appreciate the opportunity to come up. And as we call it time work ahead, sitting through the RIC conference a couple of weeks ago, Al, to your point, things are changing. There's a lot of activity. I can't help my right brain and left brain trying to balance between second license, what's going on that side, what's going on with the ISPC, Part 72. But there's a lot of activities. You all did a great job in your presentations, and as I sat there, almost the two aligning. The maps and the GAL, we have the GAL on that side. Things like that. So a lot of good things happening, and so I applaud you for that. I know on the title page here, my name's here, but I did bring it. And what we're going to do is ask on because everybody's got their application and what they developed. So hopefully that's okay, and we'll get the right person talking. And of course, if questions come up, feel free to ask. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. So as far as the agenda, we just wanted to give you an overview of, can't get into too much detail, but give you an overview, a flavor of what the application is going to contain. We were sensitive and mindful of the last couple of applications that came in, and trying to follow the change with the new rig, and talk to Chris a little bit about that after the rig. So we're trying to stay up current, but Chris, at some point we have to stop. For us right now, we're in legal review, so that's almost the time where we're there. So things are progressing, and anticipate a schedule of a submittal in early May. One thing that's I won't say a challenge, but North End is in an outage right now, so it's can't get their management attention, and we all understand that. So as we go through the discussion today, we'll give you an overview of the SSC, a little bit on background, and Tony's going to help us. there. She saw, a portion of that anyways, and we'll talk to you about a little bit about that. Brian will help us with that, and we'll get through that discussion. I'm sure there'll be some interest in that. And then at the end, we'll do a little discussion on the timeline of the ISFSI licensing activities with the high burn cast demonstration project. That's folded in with this, and Rich is going to take us through that. And then at the end, I'll wrap up with a quick summary, and then we'll get to questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tony.
Okay, so Chris and John, thank you again for coming to the site last October for our cast lift. And again, appreciate the opportunity for it today. You all probably are aware our site-specific license 2507 was issued in 1998, and since it expires in a couple of years, we have embarked on our licensure effort. We were licensed for the TN32 dry storage casks, storing low burn-up fuel only on 3 pads. And so this licensure application coming in is also for the TN32 cask, concentrating on pad number 1. We currently have 27 casks on that pad, and I'll saw that. The next slide basically just says, in the front part of our application, we talk about regulations and regulatory guidance that we use and we reference and we reviewed quite a bit of during the course of our building our license bill application, Part 72, and in case some folks are not familiar with Part 51, having to do with environmental review. We also, of course, referenced the new Reg 1927 Rev 0, the draft Rev 1. We also looked at what is being proposed or being put forward for ACRS. And there are a number of things that we touch on referencing both of those revisions in our application. The new Reg 1748 is environmental review for nuclear materials programs. Some folks didn't know that as well. We also looked at a number of ISGs, other applicable codes, whether it's ASME or ACI or what have you. This should look familiar to most folks, but in general, the license renewal application content follows this format. General information is provided about the plant. I'll speak to that in just a moment. Scoping evaluation, how we did that, conduct our aging management reviews and programs and enhancements we want to put into the program overall. I wanted to highlight here the bolded words associated with TLAAs, tech specs, additional information, in that we have no TLAAs that need to be dealt with based on our evaluation. There will be no changes associated with tech specs, and as Paul mentioned earlier, we have quite a bit of information in the application that talks about our leak cap inspection results. So the general information, again, is as it appropriately states, it talks about the company and the applicants, and Virginia Electric and Power Company, part of Dominion, and Old Dominion Electric Cooperative, co-owner of the facility, are the applicants. We discussed the business and the financial assurance that is there to maintain the operation of the facility. We also are including a component about decommissioning, financial assurance for that. Szymanski, would you like to speak to that point?
Perhaps briefly, for operating plant every 2 years, send in into the NRC funding status, and every 3 years now, for the second time in this team, we sent in our triennial update for ISFSI, and the plant is fully funded. Therefore, follows, although we reported secondarily, ISFSI is fully functioning. It is a very small, essentially a greenfield action, and we were fully.
A follow-up question. With the joint ownership, with the decommissioning funding plan, will you talk about, I think we had in the past, and I think it was the 2012 submittal, I'm not sure about the 2015 submittal of the DFP, but I think we had both submittals for Old Dominion and then Virginia Electric and Power. So will there be just one decommissioning funding plan showing the 2 ownership interests and sort of what their contribution is to the decommissioning funding?
In the LRA?
Yeah.
I'm not sure when
Oh, I think we just discussed the ownership, joint ownership. It's like 88 to 11, and then and then we'll give you a link off to that December letter.
Okay.
Probably gets into
We reference that in the part 1.
Okay. And then from the last periodic submittal of the decommissioning funding plan, it will say that there will be no changes. So it will essentially be whatever the last submittal was is the current. Okay, thank you.
Very recent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, for the next slide, beginning scoping evaluation, I'd like to ask Jim Williams to start talking about this.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. For scoping, we've obviously looked at several important sources for our information, primarily the SOC technical specifications and safety evaluation report. Our TN32 cask were licensed under a TSAR, Areva Transnuclear. That's primarily the design basis and licensing basis for the cask. We had site-specific information included in our safety analysis report. Our Appendix Alpha, and this is a key point, our Appendix Alpha of our safety analysis report provides any changes to our design from the initial licensing phase. So if we've done a 7248 evaluation or a tech spec amendment that modified our basis, then that would be presented in Appendix Alpha with that analysis. So that's an important feature, and we've obviously looked at the safety evaluation reports for these documents and docketed licensing correspondence.
So you reviewed all your 7248s for those changes?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
We provide a list of those in the LRA for you.
Okay, perfect.
Evaluations, not screenings, but just the
We have a process where you look at applicability, then you do a screen, then you do a full-blown 7248 evaluation. It's that last category that we'll be presenting for you. So the scoping results, we looked at all the different SSCs or system structures and components that make up the SOC facility. We've identified that the dry storage cask, spent fuel assemblies, and reinforced concrete pad number 1 are within the scope for license renewal. The pad is for criterion 2, which is non-safety affecting safety. The other 2 are important to safety. So out of the scoping process, we went into the AMR methodology, and the first thing we did there was look at these major components and broke those down into their subcomponents to identify their intended functions. And if they had an intended function, that subcomponent was included within the scope of license renewal. We had excluded some subcomponents from the scope of license renewal, and that justification is provided in our application. Materials and environments. Our materials are pretty straightforward. It's mainly carbon steel, low alloy steel, stainless steel. Our cast seals are essentially aluminum or silver-coated nickel metallic helical flex seals. Our environments, again, it's fairly benign. The internals of the cask are inerted with helium. Our external environment, which is an atmosphere weather environment, as we like to call it, we aren't located near a marine environment, and we aren't located near an industrial facility. We're in a remote country setting in Virginia. So we don't see a lot of excessive halides or sulfides and chlorides in the atmosphere. Primarily our aging effects that we've looked at were based on EPRI structural and mechanical tools. I think from a mechanical standpoint, UREG 1801 and the mechanical structural tools align fairly closely. When you get into the civil area, it can be a little more confusing. So we've provided a table in our application that provides what is called in structural tools and what is called in GAL. And we've provided our analysis of whether that's a match or not. So that'll be provided for us. And out of this, we obviously arrived at our determination of aging effects that require management. All of our aging results will be identified in 3 separate tables, one for the cast, one for the spent fuel assemblies, and one for the reinforced concrete pad. So next slide, we'll look at our aging management programs. We're going to have two aging management programs. One is for our cask, and one is for our pad. Our spent fuel assemblies were identified as having no aging effects. So let's talk a little bit about OE first. That's general to both of these amps. Our operating experience review cast a pretty broad net. We use keyword search terms in our corrective action database as well as the IMPO corrective action database for such words as ISFAC, dry cask, cask. So you can imagine the number of hits we got off of that. So we went through each of those and we boiled that down to our operating experience for North Anna and Dominion, as well as industry and international events that were in the IMPO database. And essentially that boils down to low pressure alarms and cask coating defects. Those were the main things to find that make up our OE. As far as the cask aging management program, we have a few enhancements we're going to make. But first of all, we're relying on continuous interseal pressure monitoring for seals, which is typical for the transnuclear cask. We rely on radiation monitoring with thermoluminescent dosimeters. And we do a quarterly visual inspection of our cask, which is basically a walk down by the system engineer. Based on some recommendations and reviews of other applications and reviews of the new reg, we're going to have some enhancements. So for the cask amp, we're going to